Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're a new subscriber, you're welcome. My name is Emanuela and I'm here to give you life experiences, personal experiences, and encouragements as the Holy Spirit leads. This channel was made just for you know kingdom purposes because God moves in different ways. And today, the topic will be about how God wrote my love story. Stay tuned. So, in 2018, I just had this unusual urge to leave my country, my home country, Nigeria, to study abroad. But I didn't know where God wanted me to go to. I was just applying to different places at that time. I didn't know at that time that God wanted me to come to Russia. And when I told my mom, she was like, "Oh, the place is too cold. You don't have to go there, blah, blah." But after I prayed and asked God to give me a sign if it's the place He wants me to go to or not, and the time was to let my mom let me go, and she should be able to pay my tuition, everything, and the rest is history now because all that happened, like everything happened. And when I got to Russia, it wasn't easy though. The first time the cold was too much. I was just shivering, from the airport when my body came to pick me up. So moving forward, I was in a relationship back then, at that time. So I just heard a voice, "Let him go. He's not your husband." At first I thought it was just me saying something, like my thoughts were just trying to deceive me. And then I realized that when I slept, I had a dream. And at that time, the person I was in a relationship with was not with me. He was like in another relationship. I was like, why is this possible? Is this person cheating on me? But no, it was God just telling me it was not my husband. I should let go. So I was like, okay, if you don't want me to get married to this guy, in which he wanted to get married to me, so give me a sign. Just show me what I need to do. Let's break up in a way that it will not affect him negatively and it won't affect me negatively. I don't want to be like someone that broke someone's heart. So I went on my knees, prayed, fasted for some days. And then, when God speaks, you'll be like, it's happening now, but you don't know that He's taking you through the process. He said, "Listen, Emanuela, I brought you here and I'm going to show you my loving kindness." And He gave me a word in Psalm 31 verse 21, which says, "The Lord will show you His loving marvelous kindness in a strong city." And as you all know, this place, not everybody likes this place because of the language barrier, the cold, everything. So God made everything so favorable for me. Like, I didn't know how, but my stay here was remarkable. For the period I was living and schooling, everything was favorable. But notwithstanding some challenging times, and my journey with God started intensively. I wanted a godly marriage right from start, but I was going about in the wrong way before God arrested me in a very strong manner that I couldn't resist but to say, "Lord, I surrender. Just have your will, have your way." And so then I wasn't really hearing God like the way I hear Him now speak audibly. If you're a Christian believer, you know God very well. You know what I'm talking about. So this YouTube channel, I opened it in 2016 when I just finished my bachelor's and I was waiting for my service here. I felt God was calling me into a deeper relationship with Him, but I didn't know how to go about it because my home was a Christian home. Like, my parents were Christians, we prayed. But Catholics, we pray, but we don't really go into the deeper side, like getting to know the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues and such. So my journey started when I decided to start listening to the voice of God intentionally, like seriously. And so I was reading my Bible. I stopped listening to some kind of secular music for time being. And fast forward in 2019, I was with a friend at that time, and she said she wanted a good husband, like stuff. So I said, okay, let's embark on this journey together. If you can do it, let's do it. At that time, she was not believing, but I kept encouraging her, not knowing that God was using me to bring her husband to her, why I should wait for mine 2 years later. Okay, so it wasn't easy, but waiting for my husband was the best thing because God made me to be a refined version of myself that could hear Him, that could speak to others. And so we started praying for like a month. We were praying seriously for our husband, like future husband. And I wasn't seeing any result, but I felt like I was hitting a chord, I was striking a chord. At that time, I had like people coming to me, but God would say, no, it's not the one. No, that's not the one. So I was like, okay, I'm tired. Let me go out and find the one myself. And then I was going on dates, but it was, I wished I didn't go for those dates because it was like horrible experiences because it was not what I was expecting to see in my future husband. So those dates, God used them for my advantage because I could pray for what I wanted in my husband. I wanted to see this in my husband. I don't want to see that in my husband. So I used those people's character to pray for a better character in my husband, So moving forward, my friend got married in 2021. And then I was so happy that, okay, the prayer we're making together all came to pass because she surrendered her life to Christ, and we started moving with God in our midst. I was so happy for her. And moving forward, 2021 passed, no sign of my husband, but I got lots of counterfeit. If God is saying you are going to get married in a kingdom way, because if I hadn't surrendered to God, I would have gotten married earlier and gotten married to the wrong person, and I would be crying by now. So looking back now, I believe God put me through this process to make me strong, to have faith more in Him, to believe in His word more. And He told me my marriage was not ordinary. It was something that we win souls for the kingdom of God. I know people don't believe in a lot of the kingdom, the spiritual life and stuff, but I want to tell you that God is real. God is real. I'm a witness to that. I'm a living witness. So fast forward to 2022, January. God gave me a word. He said, your husband is coming. I was like, God, every year you tell me my husband is coming. When? He said, I'm going to travel like Rebecca to be my husband. He gave me a scripture about Rebecca, if you know Genesis 24. And he gave me like series of scripture. Anytime I want to give up, God gives me a scripture. not to give up, to keep praying for this man. I was like, who is this man that God takes it so personal for me to pray for him? Sometimes he wakes me up in the night to start praying for this unknown man, that's my husband. And I couldn't tell anybody then, like my friends then, most of them, they don't really believe in such. So it will look like I'm too spiritual and spiritualizing everything. So I kept it to myself. I was just praying. Sometimes I use like YouTube where I watch some prayer warriors like prophetess, like Chante Kabe, for instance. She usually organizes morning devotions and stuff like that. So sometimes I join them to pray, and sometimes she say, okay, I should let God use me. She wrote me and said, let God use me. Sometimes I testify using her channel. So that's why I started talking about this. And where I was living at that time, God told me, leave that place. I'm making a way for you. Go to another place. Live alone. Because I was living with some people then. I was living with my friend in a hostel. And then I moved to stay on my own. God said he was going to provide money, everything. I shouldn't worry. I said, okay. I thought maybe I was going to meet my husband in that place. I was disappointed. Okay. So, October came. And mind you, every October, right from August, thereabouts, July, blah, 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 I get to hear something new is coming. Something new is coming. Like, it's like a shift, you know. I feel this shift, like something good is about to happen to me. So, October, I traveled to Estonia, September or so, last year, 2022. So I was thinking, okay, since I'm going for like a summer school, maybe my husband is in Estonia. That's what I thought. Because God told me I was going to travel like Rebecca. And mind you, in 2019, God gave me a word that my husband is going to treat me as King Ahasuerus treated Esther, Queen Esther in the Bible. He's going to love me more than all the women in his life. So I was like, okay, this man is really good for God to be telling me this. So, moving on, I went to Estonia. No one. I didn't get anybody. Like, no one. Like, nobody say, let me take you out for a dinner. We just went out for group dinner, had friends, talked, came back. So, God said, relax, your husband is around. And you know, I was thinking of leaving this place. I wanted to relocate. Since 2020, when I finished my master's, I wanted to relocate. And God kept me here. Everywhere I applied to go and do my PhD, declined. And so I got a PhD here. I got scholarships. Because I told God, if you want me to stay here, make it easier for me. Give me scholarships. Not just one, but give me streams of like income. Because here it's not easy to work as a foreigner because I don't really speak the language here, as you can see. So, by and large, we proceeded to praying, my friend and I. So we prayed. I seeked the face of God. I told my sister at the time, pray for me. I believe this is the season. And she was like telling me she had dreams that I'm getting married to this man that loves me so much, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, thank you, sister, for this word. Because God has been telling me I'm getting married soon. But mind you, I'm not even in a relationship, like nothing. I was just, there was this time I said, I'm not going out on any date. I'm not going to coffee date, nothing. I'm staying by myself. So I was like, okay, since God said I'm going to meet a Christian guy, I think I should download a Christian app, a Catholic match. So I was checking for Christian dating apps. I was like, since I don't go out, I search your school, come back home, and just hang out with my friends. So why don't I try this? And then I tried. The first guy that wrote me, he was like, everything, everything in a husband I was praying was just ticking the box, tick, 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 tick. And he was not being in the country here. So when God told me I was going to travel like Rebecca, I was like, this is the guy. But something in my spirit kept disturbing me. The guy, everything was okay about this guy. He treated me well. He was so nice or stuff like that. But I had to pray because my spirit was restless. Girls, if you are praying for a man and your spirit is restless, take a step backward. Relax and ask God if you can fast. Because it could be the devil trying to put someone in your path to destroy your destiny, you know. When it's from God, your spirit will be stable. Your spirit will be at rest. Even if you face challenges, you want to, still go through with it. I'm not saying that if you meet your future husband or your future wife, you will not have challenges. You're going to have it. But you still have this peace inside. You still feel calm. You still feel like going through it no matter what. But if it's with a counterfeit, if the real one is about to come, the counterfeit will show up. Not once, not twice, even 3 times. So you need the grace of God to pull through. Okay? So, October came when I got back from Estonia. And then I kept talking to this guy. And there's this other guy I met randomly from a social media. It's not a dating app. Like, we didn't have a mutual friend, but I saw this guy. One night I was just scrolling. I haven't been on that social media for like more than 8 months or even a year, if I'm not mistaken. And boom, the guy came up on my newsfeed, like people you may like to add as friends. I was like, this guy's cute though. So I was like, it's one of these people around here. Let me scroll on past. So I now logged out and something said, go back. Something said, sorry about that, my battery. Something said, go back. This guy is your husband. I was like, this guy, my husband, how? I couldn't really pick it up. And so when I went back, lo and behold, the guy sent a friend request and sent hello to me. Do you want to live in Russia? I was like, what the hell? Is this guy seriously asking me this question? As if he knew I wouldn't want to live here. And so I said, it depends. I'm not really sure at the moment. And he was so polite. I was like, wow, this guy is so polite. It's like, I have this feeling that he's my husband, but I don't know anything about him. And then I went to pray and ask God, who is this guy? Tell me everything about him. Reveal it to me. Blah, 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 blah. God did not disappoint me. He revealed this guy to me. He told me this is the man. And this guy that I'm gisting with, like I'm talking to, the one in US, is not the man for me. I was heartbroken. Then I said, okay, let me talk to this guy that God is telling me about. And this guy, we were just flowing. He was asking me about my dreams, what I want to be, what my expectation. He was just asking me things I want to talk about, He was so, giving me listening ears, and that is the prayer I was praying. Let my husband be listening to me. Then he want to know what I want to talk about. Then he want to be talking to me. Then he know things about me. Want to share the dreams with me. So I stopped talking to him because I felt he was waiting for me to chat with him. I stopped chatting with him. So I was like, I don't have time for these guys that will be thinking, okay, they are trying to hard to get, they don't want to talk to you, stuff like that. So don't mind me. And then I logged out from that place. I didn't go logging in because I told him, look, I'm not used to chatting with people here. I don't like this place. So he said, okay, please can you give me another social media handle that you are active on? I said, sure, why not? You're so polite. So I gave it to him. So the first day we chatted, and following day I didn't chat with him. He didn't chat with me. 1 month went by. Then this happened in October, last week of October, yeah. November all through we didn't chat. So I was chatting with that guy from US that was so into me. I was into him. So I didn't talk to this other guy because I wanted to be focused to know who is this one. God revealed this person. And God was revealing it to me, but I didn't want to take it. You know, human flesh, you want to fight with the spirit telling you, no, this is not the one. So until one day, this guy, I asked him, pray about it. We prayed. And he said he didn't see anything. God didn't tell him anything about me. I said, okay, it's fine. It means you're not the one for me. He said he has so many things he needs to deal with. He has so many issues he needs to handle, stuff like that. I said, okay, I wish you all the best. He said I should wait for him to handle those things and he can come back. I said, I'm not going to promise you that I'm waiting for you. But if we are meant to be together, sure, I will still be available. If not, I will be married by then. And I wish you all the best. No hard feelings. God bless you. Stuff like that. We parted ways. Contrary to that, I did not get a message from this guy that the Lord was telling me is my husband. Until my birthday, he wrote me, wishing me happy birthday. And then that month or through, God said he had like a birthday present for me. I said, who is this birthday present? What is this birthday present? He said, your husband is coming. You're going to contact, your husband is going to come in contact with you this month. Get ready. I said, okay. Thank you, Lord. So I was going to school that day when I heard a voice like, that's your husband. Chat with him because he's chatting with you. Wish him happy birthday because his birthday was 19th of December. Mind you, mine was 15th. And then I wished him happy birthday. And he was so excited. And so we started chatting till date. And that's how I met my husband. We now agreed to meet in January because he said he's going to pray about it. He was in a situationship at that time. I said, okay, no problem. I saw it in the vision already that you were in a situationship. Just try to handle it. It's fine by me. I'm not in a hurry. Just pray about it. Then we met in January. And boom, as we met in the airport, this guy brought flowers for me. And the first sign I prayed for was, let my husband be the one to bring flowers for me. The first time we meet in person. Mind you, no guy has ever done that for me in person before. So my husband brought flowers for me at the airport. Very romantic guy. So we hugged. I felt like I've known him all my life. Seriously. And then this is how we met. We talked. He was so quiet. I thought maybe he didn't like me, but it was like opposite of what I was thinking. Because he was flabbergasted when he saw me, you know. And so we agreed. We started planning on our next meeting, courtship, because we live in different cities. Next meeting, we met again because I traveled to his city to meet him. Mind you, God told me I was going to travel like Rebecca, and Rebecca traveled to meet Isaac. So I traveled to meet him. So then the second visit, this is the next one, He told me he wanted to introduce me to his family, blah blah blah. And then we started planning our wedding. We got engaged even before we met to be engaged. No, physically. We planned our wedding before we got engaged. Can you imagine? That's supernatural. Who does that? Planning wedding before you get engaged. Okay. And that is how I met my husband. And God is faithful. God made it. Everything he told me, it came true. And I pray for anyone looking and waiting on God to bless them with a marriage that is supernatural. I pray by the grace that God has given me, I impact it on you, that you will find someone that loves you, that cherishes you. And you will be happy with this person. It won't happen like the normal way, because once it's God, it doesn't happen like the way you expect it to happen. You know, when I started doing my wedding, planning my wedding, people were surprised. They were shocked. How do you know this guy? Is he good? Is he kind? Is it this? Is it that? But if I hadn't married this man, I would have regretted for the rest of my life, because God is in this union and nothing can break us apart if we have God in our midst. In our midst, the Holy Spirit is in our midst, at the center of our union. He's at the center. He said, a three-fourth cord is not quickly broken. So I believe the Holy Spirit is in my marriage. So I pray for the grace of God to be with you. And the next video, if I have time to tell you the story, I will tell you. The next video will be all about how we met. And my husband will be around to give us the feedback of how he met me and what the reaction was from his own perspective. Was it what he was expecting? So if you want to watch the next video, press like, subscribe if you're a new subscriber, and share if you want people to learn of how God writes love stories. Yes, my husband is not from the same place as I am. You know how it could be. You know how it can be these days when you're married to a different nationality, from a different country, continent, different skin tone. You know how it be. Anyway, when you seek first the kingdom of God, every other thing will be added unto you. So I hope this encourages someone that is waiting on God. It's not going to happen the way you are expecting it to happen. You're not going to meet your partner the way you are thinking you're going to meet him or her. Just keep an open mind and trust God. Do your thing. Look your best. Live your life every day like it's happening that day. Okay? Stay blessed. God bless you. If no one has told you that I love you, if no one has told you that you are loved, I love you. God bless you. May God increase you. And stay tuned. Subscribe to my channel. Peace.